whoever you are and wherever you are. This is the Technicolor Robotic Hot Air Balloon. I'm Harrison.
I'm Farhan.
And today we're going to talk about adversity. And before we got on, Farhan, we were talking about how adversity and wrestling with technical things, specifically the editing of this podcast, sort of leads to change in how we handle that. So I'd like to jump right back into where we were.
Sounds good. Harrison, would you like to kind of tee things off?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry for that. So we were talking about how when you're someone who works with things, be that software or small computers or airplanes or skateboards, it doesn't really matter what it is. You sort of begin to take on this attitude of making it work, damn it. And as you grow in that, your tolerance for it not working becomes very, very specific. And so you begin to be someone who gives very, very specific direction. My first life was in helicopters, and bringing the airplane back to the hangar and saying, well, this doesn't work, doesn't help anyone. What is useful is to say, this airplane doesn't work for this specific reason, and I think a possible remedy is this, this, and this. That's very useful. So, and then you were talking about your experience with doing beta testing and things around large tech companies.
Yeah, so the less so on the beta testing side, but more so in being engaged with user experience researchers from major companies such as Google. And I've for many years, I've made myself known to them, and I get called in to contribute towards something that they're building. And my interest is, this isn't a new interest of mine. The reason I actually wanted them to get to know me a little bit is because I thought I could help, and it's a topic that I'm passionate about, the user experience part. And what I mean by user experience is that if you end up building something, especially if you happen to be, well, no matter what it is, whether it's hardware, software, skateboard, whatever, helicopter, you name it, if there is a human involved or a person involved, better, a real person involved, and that person may be Farhan or could be Harrison, or so let's get real personal about it.
Yeah.
Then you want to be able to you want to engage that individual and get their feedback. Not at the tail end or when there's a problem, but right up front. And you will be able to produce better things for it. So back to the user experience things. When I actually, when some of these user experience researchers have reached out to me, it'll be kind of cryptic in terms of what they want to deal with initially, and then of course they'll go through their vetting process, and then they will, if they feel that you are going to be a good candidate, they'll engage you. So in those engagements, what I've found is to be really, really critical. And what I find is that the researchers really appreciate that candidness. And if you can, because out of it come insights that they may not have gleaned for one reason or another. And those insights are going to be could potentially be the make or break, point of a product for that matter. So anyway, I think it's in design. It's important to be clear as to who you're designing for, and then engage those stakeholders right from the get-go, ideally.
So As you were talking, I was listening and thinking, and the thing that really came to my mind is there's positive critical and there's negative critical. And I think there's a real mark of maturity for engineers or people who work with them to bridge the gap, to say, this, this sucks, it's a piece of garbage, you should all be fired, is negative critical. And we've got a lot of that in the world today. And it's not, it feels good. I mean, it feels good for like 30 seconds. It doesn't feel good if you're on the receiving end. It feels good if you're the person wagging the finger, but it doesn't help. It doesn't make anything better, because generally, the thinking about many of the things that I've built and being on the receiving end of positive but critical feedback, it's not that I didn't do a good job. It's that I didn't see the thing through the eyes of the person who was going to be using it. So the features that I thought were really cool and innovative and important, not so much. And the features that I thought were just sort of last minute add-ons were what was really, really important. For example, I know some guys who built a very large optimization engine, and they worked on it. They worked with the client. They worked with the client's reps. They did all this work. At the very end, they delivered it. And the client came back and said, "This is the best thing ever. We love it." I said, "Oh, that's great. Thank you." And the client said, "We have this report that we have to generate every week. And this tool you gave us auto generates the report. And that's why we love it." The reason they loved it had nothing at all to do with all the things that went into building it. And if you're at sort of a basic or journeyman level, you say, "Oh, that's terrible." If you're at a more senior, sadder but wiser level, you say, "Hey, a win's a win. I built something that you love. The fact that you love it for a reason different than I wanted you to love it. But the punchline is you love it."
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's engaging. I mean, I think this gets back to some bigger things. I mean, if you can put your if you can be curious and maybe not be aware of your potential to tread into the land of arrogance, then I mean, I think some of those types of things can really open your eyes and your mind towards moving towards things that are really not only that are useful to beyond yourself.
Yeah.
Through and that all of that's really going to come through engagement. I mean, life is not a closed book exam.
No, it's not.
So let's engage and explore, and whether it's for building a better product or delivering a better user experience in particular, or whatever it might be, I think it's good to be curious, good to be aware of falling into the trap of arrogance, thinking that you know it all, that kind of thing.
Well, I think that the arrogance sneaks up on you, not so much with you thinking you know it all, but thinking that other people don't know anything. That's kind of the door that opens. And I know that sounds like the other side of the coin, and it is. But there are some things that are designed and they're put together in such a way that no matter what you do, they're going to be successful, which is frustrating. The use case that I have in mind right now is actually the automated checkout at grocery stores. I absolutely despise those. The little kiosks that check your groceries. They don't do any of the things that I want them to do as a machine. And of course, part of the reason, having lived here for almost, I mean, I've lived off and on in this town the majority of my life. Or let me put it differently. I've lived here more than I've lived anywhere else, including the home that I grew up in. And part of the experience of going to the grocery store is you kind of get to know the people who work at the grocery store, and you get to have, hey, Bob, how's your day going? Oh, it's good. Good to see you. Hey, thanks. Gosh, eggs are expensive. And going through the kiosk, yeah, it's faster, but it sort of robs you of that opportunity to have that experience.
Absolutely. Harrison, could you put it in stop? Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Could you stop the
Oh yeah.
I apologize.
So we're back from a short pause, and we were in the middle of talking about grocery store machines or automated checkout kiosks.
Absolutely. Well, those it seems to me that these kiosks continue to get better and better as an exercise. Well, at least based upon our, my wife is super critical of technology, and I really, 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 really appreciate that. So if she doesn't have to use a technical, especially if it's an AI component, she's not going to do it. So having said that, typically we'll at Whole Foods we'll go through the person checkout because she just kind of likes that.
Yeah.
But Whole Foods has started to add these automated checkout areas, and when there've been times where we've seen a very long line and we've had very few things, and so we've opted to, it made sense to actually go try the thing out. And as it turns out, now we're using the automated checkout wherever possible, and it's easy for her because she's gotten some practice with it. It's well designed, and she's gotten practice. The two combined together translate to me saying that, okay, well, somebody's designed something well. I mean, because it actually works with somebody who is ultra critical of the technology component. So anyway,
yeah, it's hard for me to see. It's hard for me to see what a it's hard for me to see what a well-designed grocery checkout that I would prefer over a human checkout, for reasons other than just, oh, this is a long line and I have to get somewhere.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I'd say that on the grocery checkout part, when we go there, any place we frequent on a regular basis, the grocery folks, they end up knowing you, and there is that in itself is a special thing way beyond technology. So the experience, if we talk about, as we were speaking earlier about user experiences and the other, to me, the idea of a user experience should not be just confined to the technological components of things. And so there are I think it's important to be able to open oneself up to all the various nuanced attributes of an experience that are part of our day-to-day. It's important to kind of take note of that, and those once again could be the thing that makes people come back to your offering, whatever that might be.
Yeah, a lot of times the thing that makes you come back to an offering has to do with your very first impression, and generally doesn't have that much to do with what the people who designed it would have thought it would have been.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, if what actually, since we're speaking a little bit about design and experience, one of the things that I found to be especially interesting are the people who design hardware. If left to their own devices, this is what I found, is that they're notorious for creating really twiddly things.
Oh, I live in this space. In fact, I was cursing last night because I bought this AMD Kira system on module that you had recommended to me some months ago. And the instructions, like a lot of things, all of these small computers, the instructions are really good if you're an engineer who works for the company that built it.
Right.
If you're a civilian, forget about it. To the point where you could tell this, because I'm following the instructions to get the computer to do the thing I want it to do, and in the instructions it says DBF, which is the package installation context in Red Hat. Or in Fedora, and the system runs Ubuntu. And all these Linux systems, they're all they're all almost compatible, right? Like Debian and Ubuntu are almost the same, except they're not, which makes it actually far more challenging than if they were totally different. Because you type commands and you think, well, this ought to work. Yes, we are all agreed, it ought to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think there's, having said that, I've thought that in terms of thinking of opportunities, generally speaking, like if we're talking about hardware versus software, I'd say that I'd say that definitely in the hardware side, from an experience perspective, that bridging that gap. Okay, technically underneath the hardware design may be stellar, but and state of the art. But if somebody's going to be using it, whether it could, and when I'm talking about somebody using it, it could be a developer building something on top of it, like as in your experience, for example. And so that's a user at a certain level, not the end user, but it's still a user. It could also be something, let's say that it's a piece of hardware that is mechanical, got some mechanical components to it, and it needs to be serviceable in the field. So you're going to be, you need to be able to, there's going to be a service person who's going to be involved in that, or a network person, or this, that, the other. Countless folks involved in these kind of things. So it's important to kind of be able to design things that are, that are easy for those folks to deal with.
So not only easy, it has to be preferable. Because with a lot of the things I've worked on, in fact, I was just admonishing someone who was building something the other day with this exact point. So I'm going to build something, and it's going to do something, and it's going to do something. It's going to make a cup of coffee, say, and I'm going to hand it to somebody, and the person I'm going to hand it to is the person who makes coffee in their house. And as soon as I hand it to them, they're going to say, but wait a minute, my purpose, it's beyond job. My purpose was to make coffee. And now you've given me this thing that does this. What's my purpose now? And that's incredibly powerful, because that person is going to say, well, look, your automated coffee machine sucks because, it didn't heat the water up exactly the way I would have. So not only does it have to work on the first try, it has to work so incredibly well that it is unimpeachable. And that's not what people who build things like to do. What people who build things like to do is build it good enough, and then go from there.
Yeah, good enough. I think this actually reminds me of what I wanted to say, and I think I've lost track of it. I think the bar to doing good hardware is pretty low. I mean, I'm actually back to the experience part of hardware, as opposed to the underpinnings or the actual hardware design. I think wherever you interface with an individual, that's where who needs to do something with it. That's the part I'm really speaking about. I think the bar to doing something great over there is really low in general. That's been my experience. I could say something similar about software. So this is not about the technical underpinnings of these things, but also where it actually engages with an individual, or somebody's actually using it, that part of it. So I think, and so if you produce a great piece of hardware or software, and you've never engaged, and at the end of the day, some individual somewhere, a person is going to be using it, and you have never engaged either your expertise in designing an experience for that individual or even thinking about it, then you've missed the boat.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
So I want to move us towards summation here in a minute, but there's a certain the thing that hurts smart people in design is a very specific hubris, and it's to walk in and say, well, I'm going to create this computer system that's going to do this thing that you've been working on for 20 years. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's impossible to create a system that will be better than what somebody who's been working on it for 20 years would come up with. I'm saying that it's incredibly unlikely that you're going to do that on the first day. And that's what engineers and people in our space want to do. They want to walk in and say, oh, well, or the thing that just makes my inner consultant cringe is to say, oh, well, why didn't you just do it this really simple way that obviously doesn't work? And so it's really important. And technical people can be bad at this because they not only do they sometimes not have soft skills, they feel like having soft skills is beneath them. I'm gonna quote Richard Feynman here. The problem doesn't care about all the things that you know, right? So sitting back and listening to the problem is really important.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What is it that you're trying to solve? I think that just one additional thing that I'd like to be able to share is I think continuing to have a mental dialogue, no matter what you're doing, is an important thing. And it's basically a Q&A dialogue. What is the question you're trying to answer? What is it? And then you, it's not a one-time deal. It's like it's every second. And it's like if you can get yourself into a state where you're constantly doing this and you're doing it without taxing your system or being distracted by it, I think that's a good thing. Just constantly asking yourself a question. Are you asking yourself, what is the ultimate effect you want to be able to have by designing a piece of hardware? It's put in a little box or whatever. What is it? What's the experience look like? What does that look like? This, that, the other, and gleaning, answering the question for yourself even.
Yeah. So I think that the point, and I think this is a great place for us to wrap. The point of having of being educated, which is different than the point of being trained. The point of success in education looks like you having that dialogue with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you're both the performer and the coach, right? You're saying, I mean, that's the drill I'm going through with what I'm building this cycle right now. It's like, come on, Harrison, it ought to be able to do this, and then turn around and say, okay, well, let me see if I can make it do this, and then turn back around. Yeah,
that's it. Right there. Yeah. Having that inner dialogue and being as you said, being the performer and the coach that's a good thing to do. It's also known as self-awareness, maybe sometimes.
Yeah. So anyway, that'll be a great discussion for our next session. So thank you so much for joining us today. New episodes drop Wednesdays and Fridays, and until then, I've been Harrison.
Farhan.
And thank you for joining the Technicolor Robotic Hot Air Balloon.